Bitcoin is trading at $124,000. It is October 6th. We are now in the end stretch. And the whole question remains is how high can this market still go and how long can it go on for? Because it is guaranteed that we are now closer to the end of this cycle than we are at the beginning. In fact, we are probably in the final weeks of this entire cycle, and it could end at any point. But the whole big question is that in the final stretch of the entire bull cycle, the last couple of weeks are always the most explosive in upside. So if you sell too early, you're obviously going to miss out on that potential upside. But if you get too greedy and you sell too late, then it's going to come all the way back down and we have a bear market. So it is very, very difficult, but very important to understand where we are in these markets. And that's what I do in these videos. I present to you the data. We look at previous cycles. We look at a whole lot of factors. And I want to give you all of that so you are informed and can make your own decision. Because at the end of the day, only you can decide what to do with your own money. And you are responsible for your wins and for your losses. And as someone who has been here since 2017 and has seen the previous booms and busts, I can tell you that when it's done and it goes all the way up, the bear market is brutal. If you don't sell, you get wrecked. I have seen it over and over and over, previous cycles. People with millions of dollars in unrealized gains, in NFTs, in ICOs, in shitcoins, in meme coins, even in Bitcoin and Ethereum. People who were up massively and didn't take profits got wrecked. Some people that had 8-figure unrealized profit or losses in the shitcoins, in the NFTs, went down to under 100K in the next bear market. It is no joke. And if you're up life-changing money, there's always going to be future opportunities. But if you round trip that, you might never get that chance again. So if you're up millions of dollars and you can change your life and your family's lives, you can pay off your house, buy a new house, quit your job, move to another country, retire your parents, all of that stuff. If you have that position right now, you have to weigh off the potential downside if the cycle stops or when it stops and you don't take profits and you round trip that, what do you stand to lose? Versus if you get greedy, and that's the other side of the spectrum. Lots of people, as the price goes higher towards the very final phase, right? The last couple of weeks, as price increases, people get more FOMO and they start betting more. They do the opposite. They start getting greedy when you're supposed to be fearful. They start increasing risk as the price goes higher, start adding leverage, start overextending. Then they buy the top and get absolutely wiped out. So that is why I'm making these videos. I want to warn you, be smart. The only way to realize profits is to take profits, to cash out. That's the only way you make profits. And this is especially important with altcoins. Bitcoin is maybe a different story where if you buy the top and you hold it long enough, 4, 5, 6 years, you're probably going to get back to that level and you can dollar cost average. But most of the altcoins, most of the shitcoins, the ICOs, the NFTs, the memes, all of that stuff went down 99% and most of it never recovered. So you want to be smart with this stuff. Have a strategy, have a plan when to cash out. It's your decision, but you need to have a plan. By the way, if you haven't signed up for my Leverage Hero crypto trading course, it's 100% free for now. I'm going to start charging for it sometime in the future. But if you want access to it, I literally put this training together. It is very, very good. It is something that I could easily charge money for. It is free for now. The link is in the description down below. Sign up, zero cost, a lot of upside, a lot of stuff you can learn. Go check it out if you haven't done so already. Okay, so let's start out with some facts, some data to set the tone here. So we know that crypto and Bitcoin moves in 4-year cycles, and that's most likely due to the fact that built into the Bitcoin code, every 4 years approximately, we get this halving of the blockchain rewards for Bitcoin. So, previous cycle data. 2013 cycle peak was on December 4th, 2013. It was 371 days after the halving at a price of $1,150. 2017 cycle peak, December 17th, 2017, which by the way was the exact same day that CME Group launched their futures. This was 526 days after the last halving at a price of approximately $19,700. The previous cycle, 2021, November 10th was the peak date, 548 days past the halving at approximately $69,000. So, statistically, this does not mean anything. It's 3 data points, but this is what we have and it gives us something to look forward towards, or to look at and to try and measure what we're currently doing. So two things that stand out to me immediately from this is, number one, you could argue that each cycle is getting a little bit longer, 371, 526, and 548. The downside to that, or the thing that could make that untrue, is the fact that in 2021, I think the cycle was heavily manipulated by the FTX and Alameda scam. They were wash trading, they were doing a lot of stuff, as you probably know, and you could argue that the real top in the 2021 cycle was actually in May of 2021, and a lot of altcoins will confirm this. For example, if you go look at Dogecoin and a lot of alts like that, they actually peaked in May of 2021 and not in November of 2021. So that's something where we don't really know, and that could cancel the argument that each cycle gets longer. But okay, that's one thing. The other thing that is very clear about this, the peak date, 2013, December 4th, then December 17th, then November 10th. So all three previous cycles peaked in either November or early December, which means that we are now at the beginning of October, which means we could have up to 2 months left here also, based on maybe the cycle is the same length or a little bit longer than the previous one, and maybe we need to peak somewhere in November or December. Again, this is not anything statistical, it is a pure guess based on this. It could also be completely different, and that's why I would say that we have to assume that from this moment onwards, the cycle top can be any single moment, literally any single day from now onwards for the next 2 months. Now, obviously, that makes a huge difference, because another month or another 2 months at full bullish pace, when the liquidity is flowing and everyone gets euphoric, that could send prices significantly higher in the short term. And that is why it is so difficult to time the cycle, but it's also why it's so important to understand what's happening. Because one thing is sure, that when the cycle peaks, the bear is brutal, the drop is brutal, especially for altcoins. I think the best way to illustrate this is to look at the Doge chart to show you what happened in the previous cycle. This is the perfect example. So you can see over here, from the start of April 2021, the 5th of April 2021, it literally took 5 weeks for Dogecoin to do a 10x up to this point. 5 weeks, that is all that you had. And after that happened, literally in the same week already, it pulled back from 73 cents to 50. So you can see the week it hit a peak, it already pulled back and closed the week 22% lower. So we had a 10x in 5 weeks. And then after that, that was the top, the bear market hit, and we dropped 92%. So that means you had to have bought before and you had to have sold on the way up, or you would have ended up lower than what you buy. So that makes it so incredibly tricky, especially with these altcoins. So basically, if you didn't buy in this area, then you would have bought on the way up, and it would have made things much harder. You wouldn't have made a 10x. And let's say you bought over here, if you didn't sell, you can still end up 50% lower in the bear market. That's the whole problem. And what most people will also do is they don't buy over here. They're going to start buying at the top. And they're going to start buying with more than they should. They're going to start using leverage. They're going to start overextending. And then you buy this top area. You get trapped here. You get a 70, 80, 90% loss. And it takes years to get back to that level, if even. Because you can see, we are now 4 years past that level, and we didn't even get anywhere close to that level. We had one little spike, which was still lower. So if you bought crypto, if you bought Dogecoin above this level, so above the 50-cent level, which isn't that crazy to think about, a lot of people would have got a FOMO above that 50-cent level in the last area, you would still be at a loss right now, 4 years later. And that's what I say. With Bitcoin, it's a different story. With Bitcoin in general, so far, even if you bought the top, if you would have held 4 years, you would have still been in profit on that top buy, especially if you dollar cost averaged. With altcoins, 99.999% probably, if you bought the top, you're wrecked, and it's not coming back there again. And maybe Dogecoin this cycle will go to a new high 4 years later, 4.5 years later. But again, maybe it won't. So that is a real problem and a real warning. And that is why I'm making this video here, to make you aware of what happened previously, so that then when something happens, like let's say Dogecoin does go crazy, let's say we do get an altcoin season in the next 1 or 2 months and things go nuts, that you don't get confused and think this is the start of Dogecoin going to $100 and that this is the start of a bull market and that you need to add more and add leverage. No. When these pumps come, when the next big pump comes, it's going to be very likely the final exit pump of the entire crypto cycle. The bear market will follow. And if you don't play it right, especially if you get greedy and start adding to the position as it pumps, you will get absolutely wrecked in the bear market that's coming. That's most likely going to happen in 2026. That could start in literally a couple months or maybe even weeks from now already. So you have to be prepared. If you are positioned, you need to have an exit strategy. When it pumps, where are you going to take profit? And at the very least, in my opinion, not financial advice, but based on the experience, based on what's happened here, you should at least look to remove all of your initial capital from these markets when you can. So if I'm buying something, if it's up 2x, I'm taking out my initial. And this is obviously very important if you're working with considerable money. It doesn't matter if you're investing $100 or 1,000 or 10,000, whatever, you can make that money back. But if you're talking about 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures invested in these markets, the market can turn around like that. And when you're up 2x or 3x, for me personally, that's when I want to take my initial out. And that way, okay, if I want to continue to gamble with the rest, and I think there's maybe a chance it goes a lot higher, okay, I'm doing it with the profit. But I'm not keeping large amounts of initial in when I have the chance to take it out at a 2x, especially in this phase of the cycle where we're at historic cycle end lengths. Yes, Q4 could be bullish. October and November are historically the most bullish months. But with significant size, if I'm up 2x or 3x, I'm taking out my initial. No risk to that. And as it continues to pump higher, like if we see Dogecoin go to 50 cents here, and I'm in Dogecoin, then I'm taking out half if I haven't done so already, and taking profits. And if it goes to 60 cents, 70 cents, 80 cents, assuming that it would, let's say it does, I'm taking profits all the way up because we don't know where it's going to end. You see, even in this previous cycle, we had this little pump for a couple of weeks. Even that completely fizzled and retraced. So we can assume that if this is, even if it's going to $1, it's probably going to end up below 20 cents again in the bear market that follows. So you want to be very smart with this, and I'm repeating myself here over and over because I want to warn everyone that is watching these videos what is going to happen. There is money to be made, but you have to take profits on the way up because otherwise this will happen. So with that out the way, let's actually take a look at some charts and let's see what they're telling us. Let's see what the levels are to watch for an if-then scenario and potential plays. So this is the Bitcoin weekly chart. You can see we're at 124,000, basically all-time highs. The things that stand out here is, number one, a bull market is basically a high time frame bullish trend, which means that when the price is above the 50-week moving average, as long as it's above the 50-week moving average, so this one right here in blue, the trend is still bullish. That's as simple as it is. When we get a weekly close below, like over here, that is when it is a warning. It's most likely when the bear market is confirmed, and then we drop another 50 to 60% below that. So right now, this is about $101,000. If we get a weekly close below that, we probably drop another 50 to 60%, which at this point in time is about 50 to 40,000 if that were to be the target. Obviously, every week that things go higher, the MA goes higher, and that will change things. So the bear target will depend on when, at which point in time, we lose the 50 MA and at what level that is. Now, what you can also see very clearly is every time so far now in the cycle that the Bitcoin chart is making a higher high on weekly, the RSI is not confirming it. It's making a lower high. This is a warning that this is just a final push being driven up, and at some point it's going to reverse in a massive way. We are on the third thrust. Now, given everything that I've explained so far, we're in Q4, October. We have potentially another 2 months to go. Anywhere between now and 2 months from now, I would say. And obviously a lot can happen. So they can push it higher. How much higher? That's impossible to say at this point in time. In hindsight, there will be some way to calculate it with a fib extension. You could say also that like maybe the next target, if this pushes higher, the fib extension of this previous move is about 135 or 136,000, which kind of lines up with if you draw a line over this top. End of the day, the bear is only confirmed below the 50-week moving average, but that is currently $25,000 lower. So I do think as long as Bitcoin continues higher here, or at least trades sideways, that there is a possibility for the rotation into altcoins and to get that alt season pump, to see Dogecoin maybe do a 2x, 3x, 4x, maybe 5x if everything goes nuts as it has in the previous cycles. That is a possibility. And obviously the more that happens and the higher that Dogecoin and alts go, the more likely it is that we are getting closer and closer to the top, as I explained, and then obviously you want to take profits on the way up. But for now, Bitcoin is in a high time frame bullish trend. We had a very strong week last week, and right now, unless we get back below 112,000, it's probable that we continue higher here and maybe even hit 135,000. Now, if we're looking at Ethereum, it's back at $4,570. I think it's also pretty simple here to say that it is still in a high time frame bullish trend. It's above the 50-week moving average, and we held the previous highs here as support, basically, besides the wick. And that means we're probably taking a run at the all-time highs once again, and maybe this time a proper sweep here. So we're probably taking a run at 5,000, maybe 5,200, something like that. And then we have to see what happens. So the various levels to watch is if we get back below 4,100, things get dangerous and we can probably drop to mid-range like 2,800 or so. Until then, we're probably targeting 5,000 to 5,200. And then we have to see, does everything go nuts and do we get a massive run where it goes to like 6,000 or 6,500? Or is it just going to be another sweep, a better sweep with a bearish RSI divergence and a drop back down like that? You can also see there is already here also a bearish RSI divergence on the weekly over here between this high and this. So that's why I say it's very likely that we can still get some sort of final pump. We have a window of about up to 2 months, but also it could end at any single point in time. And that's why it's so important to be aware of this. You know, and that's important. If you have spot and you're in from the lows, like you're up already big, in a big way. The only time when this becomes a concern is if you bought at like, you know, all-time highs last cycle and you're only barely breaking even right now. And if that's the case, I mean, you have to consider what you're going to do here. Because it would be pretty ugly if you're bought at all-time highs, you never dollar cost averaged, and it basically just sweeps the high by a little bit and drops all the way back down to like $1,500 or $1,000 next cycle, and you completely round tripped and didn't even get the chance to get out at break even. So those are all things that you do need to consider. And then finally, let's take a look at the total crypto market cap. So we can clearly see here there's a bearish RSI divergence, right? Same what topped the last cycle over here, higher high, lower high on the RSI, and you can see the same thing here. In fact, we had an initial divergence over here. You can see the first one, and then it resulted in a nice sell-off pullback back to the 50-week moving average, and now we have another one over here. So yes, we could still overshoot. Maybe we still go a bit higher on everything. Maybe it does something like this, but I do think we're getting closer and closer towards the end of this entire cycle. And how far we go, how much longer from here and how much higher, I can't tell you. We know that in the final phase, things can go absolutely nuts. In the final few weeks, the price movement can go parabolic, as we saw with Dogecoin. The last 5 weeks of the previous cycle, it literally did a 10x in 5 weeks' time. But if you weren't in it before and you didn't sell when it pumped, it would have completely round tripped and you could have probably even ended in a loss. So you need to have a plan. You need to have a strategy. At least consider removing initial capital when you're up 2 or 3x and take profits on the way up, especially in altcoins. Again, Bitcoin is a bit of a different story. Even if you buy the top, if you have no liquidation risk, it's just spot. There's a good chance that if this continues 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to be at new all-time highs, especially if you dollar cost average on that. But that strategy does not work on pretty much 99.9% of all the altcoins out there. So hopefully you found this video informative. Smash the like button if you did. Share it with a friend, someone who needs to see this, who can benefit from it. Feel free to leave a comment down below with your thoughts. And go and check out my free course. It is free for now. It is Leverage Hero. It is a crypto trading course that will help you understand everything that I show here in these markets. Market structure, liquidity, how all of this works, and my favorite high probability trading setup, and giving it to everyone for free for now. The link is in the description down below. Go and sign up. It's 100% worth doing.